The Honourable the Leader of the Greens.
Oh, thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm a bit surprised to see that the Minister of Housing wasn't in a rush to get up and defend his record, but I'm very happy to step in. And I also want to thank the member for Franklin, Ms Standen, for bringing this matter on as a matter of public importance debate, because it is one of the most significant issues confronting Tasmania today, and it's particularly galling to sit here in question time and listen to the Treasurer crow about his budget management and again allude to these golden times when we know that there are people sleeping in tents, there are people sleeping in cars, there are people who are sleeping on couches at friends' and families' places because Tasmania is experiencing a housing and homelessness crisis, Madam Speaker. Not only is there not enough supply of affordable, energy-efficient and secure housing, Madam Speaker, but tenants themselves in both the public and the private rental market are being let down by deficiencies in the Residential Tenancy Act that fail to protect them. They are particularly vulnerable, Madam Speaker, in times of housing crisis when rents are soaring and pressure for private and public rentals is so high. Tenants in the private rental system are potentially being squeezed by landlords, being threatened with eviction, facing soaring rents. I have spoken to constituents who've seen their rents go up by $100, $150 a week with no warning at all. So we need to make sure that the Residential Tenancy Act, Madam Speaker, has a set of minimum standards in it for a start, and it needs to be placed on the record in this place that in 2013, under a Labor Green government, we passed amendments to the Residential Tenancy Act that put in place some basic minimum standards and protections for tenants. They were due to come into effect. There was a delay embedded in the legislation. They were due to come into effect in October 2014. And what do you know? One of the first things the Liberals did in government was roll over to the property class, to the Real Estate Institute, and abandon the minimum standards. We don't even have a set of minimum standards in the Residential Tenancy Act. Madam Speaker, there is no protection for tenants from landlords exploiting them. We need to have a capacity to make sure that rent increases, like they are in the ACT, are capped to some extent. In the ACT, they're capped at CPI. We've got gouging of some of our most disadvantaged people by landlords who are exploiting the housing crisis. We have a government that for more than 4 years starved the housing budget of funding. We came in here, the Greens, and raised it over and over again under the previous minister. Every time you looked at those budget papers, there was no extra money in there for affordable housing. And this is at a time, Madam Speaker, when the federal coalition government had walked away from the National Rental Affordability Scheme, had bled dry money that should be going into housing and homelessness action. And when you have a look at the federal budget papers from last Tuesday night, Madam Speaker, you see that culture of disdain for renters, for people who are in housing stress. Because across the forward estimates, Madam Speaker, in the federal budget, there is $1 billion cut in real terms to housing, $200 million coming out of the National Affordable Housing Agreement, a cut in real terms. The National Partnership Agreement on Affordable Housing, $800 million cut in real terms over the forward estimates. So when Minister Jensch gets up shortly and talks about a record state spend, which so far has delivered far too few homes, in part, they are squeezed into this because their federal colleagues really could not care less about increasing the supply of affordable housing. It is structurally embedded in our economy, Madam Speaker, that we shaft the poor, that we favour the propertied class through negative gearing and capital gains. And what does that say to our young people who are already dealing with climate stress? It says the government in Canberra doesn't care about them. It favours the wealthy over them and their future. It was laced through the entire federal budget, Madam Speaker. Young people today can not only not dream of owning their own home, it's becoming increasingly impossible for them to find one to rent.
That's the situation we're in. And the Treasurer and the Premier should find some humility, Madam Speaker, instead of coming in here and doing it every time. Talk about the money, talk about the economy, talk about the roads, lie about the golden age. We're sick of it, Madam Speaker, because we come into direct contact with people who are so stressed. Single parents, young people, older women, facing rent increases that soak up some 3/4 of their income, and often that is a Commonwealth support payment. So, Madam Speaker, we know from the National Rental Affordability Index that came out late last year that Hobart is the least affordable capital city in the country. Now, we're not seeing people sleeping on the lawns of Parliament, Madam Speaker. It doesn't mean they're not homeless. The showgrounds is no longer available to people who need temporary emergency accommodation, and we haven't heard anything yet from this minister about what he will do and his department will do to provide that emergency response, let alone increasing the supply. Now, I'll end on a more affirming note, Madam Speaker. I believe that Minister Jentzsch wants to get this right. I believe that Minister Jentzsch is more capable of driving an increase in the supply of affordable housing than his predecessor was. Now, in part, that is because there's been 4 years of underfunding, and the government knows Minister Jentzsch needs to be given a break because it is as a direct result of the policies of state and federal Liberal governments that we are facing a housing and homelessness crisis in Tasmania.
Thank you.